Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stuck in the Catch Fence. A little bit of an impromptu live session here. Wanted to kind of talk to you guys about something that, was discussed by Denny Hamlin, and kind of wanted to break it down because I'm expecting the news to drop tomorrow, but figured maybe we could talk a little bit about it before it happens tonight. My name's again Ryan Peters. I'm joined by my other two co-hosts, Joe Spillman and Steve Risley. Steve's getting ready to have lasagna. Joe is going to have what?
I've already eaten.
Oh,
We're good.
oh, so you might fall asleep.
Yeah, I may actually. That's a big possibility, depending on what we're talking about tonight, Ryan. Because you're just like, hey, let's go on air, and you never tell us what we're going to talk about. So, I guess let's get to it.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of worried if we talk about this too long that Steve actually will lose his appetite because we're going to start talking about Rick Hendrick and Hendrick Motorsports and what's going on with them. But
I
Steve,
told you, Ryan, I'm impartial right now. My boy's out with a broken leg. I don't care I don't want any of the other Hendrick boys to win. Screw them.
well, let's get into what I gathered you guys for. Again, impromptu on the spot. Give us your analysis. I was listening to Denny Hamlin's Actions Detrimental on Dirty Mo Media, and I thought he brought up a situation that we could discuss before. Again, I think the hammer possibly being let down tomorrow. Denny Hamlin, when brought about the louvers, and again, those are the fins on the top of the car that allow the air to come out of the hood and then create downforce throughout the rest of the vehicle. Those were confiscated before the Phoenix race. And the most recent, I guess, quote by anybody at Hendrick Motorsports was Jeff Gordon, and he said, "This is weighing on me heavily." So that's not a positive quote from somebody very high up, essentially running the show that doesn't have the Hendrick name at Hendrick Motorsports. And Denny Hamlin was asked about it, what he thought would happen. And Denny Hamlin said that he thinks essentially we're going to see the biggest fine that we've ever seen in NASCAR history all at one time. And that would be the penalties levied against Brad Keselowski last year for modifying a part, because from the way that he presented it is that when it came to the louvers, NASCAR sent out a memo that said, "Hey, we know that this part that you guys are receiving is not fitting well. However, do not alter it." We could talk about how that's kind of shitty in the grand scheme of things, because if it's not fitting well, then maybe you shouldn't be sending it to $500,000 or $350,000 vehicles.
Ryan. Scotch tape solves every problem.
We'll get to Scotch tape.
Okay.
And so they were told not to do that. And essentially going through pre-race inspection, they found out that something was different when it came to Hendrick Motorsports. And it wasn't just Hendrick Motorsports that they took. They also took Colleague Racing's. Why, we're not really sure, but it seemed like they were more focused on Hendrick. Maybe Colleague receives theirs from Hendrick. I'm not really sure. Maybe they were just using it as, like what this should be compared to what it is. That is to be unknown. All of this is pure speculation. But that being said, Denny Hamlin said last year he and Kyle Busch had to forfeit a race. Denny Hamlin forfeited a win. Kyle Busch forfeited his second place. That was first time something happened like that in 60 years. He expects a 100-point deduction from all four teams. He also said he expects all four crew chiefs to be suspended. I believe it was 4 races last year. Again, we were doing this at the top of our head. And then 10 playoff points on top of that. And then the money, Rick Hendrick could really care less about the money. He makes a ton of money, so that won't hurt them as bad as RFK. But those are huge, essentially the highest penalty that you can get without saying you're not allowed to run in NASCAR. So another thing, you mentioned Scotch tape, and that is something Denny Hamlin brought up as well. That car passed pre-race inspection, and we can get to this here in just a little bit on top of it. It was post-race that the vehicle for Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch did not pass post-race inspection. So my question to you first, before we get to the Scotch tape incident and kind of do an apples to apples comparison, if they are handed this penalty that Denny Hamlin says he expects them to be handed, do you think the crime fits the punishment? And Joe, I'll start with you.
Well, first I gotta really think to myself, is Denny Hamlin saying this because I almost slipped up there, because he wants it to happen, or is this what he truly believes? I think you got to take that into account to begin with. Obviously, Denny Hamlin was hit with a huge penalty last year, stripping away a win from him, in a essentially a punishment that I didn't think, and I know Steve differed on that, but I didn't think that it fit the crime for what they did with the Scotch tape. However, knowing the information we have now about the louvers and NASCAR saying, hey, I pretty much, we know this is a crappy product. We're working on it. Don't do anything with them in the meantime. If Hendrick did indeed alter those, that was kind of a pre-constructed crime on their part. And I could see a large penalty coming down. Now, I would almost think, Brad Keselowski, what did he do last year? File a little bit down on the rear spoiler of his car, essentially.
Something to that nature, yes.
Yeah, and I don't think NASCAR was even really ever very open about that. If Hendrick has intentionally altered a piece of their car that they were specifically told by NASCAR not to do, and they did it anyway, I would think that the penalty would have to be at least on the same level with RFK last year. And if it's not, then that's kind of an injustice. And I'm a Hendrick fan, but at the end of the day, when it comes to these race cars, rules are rules. And if everybody is under the same instructions and you try to circumvent that, then some sort of punishment has to come down. And if there's already a precedent set, like we saw last year with RFK, you almost have to follow those guidelines. So I think that we possibly could be seeing a historical penalty come down, that is just gonna, drop everybody's head. However, I don't think the implications, even with the large penalty this year, is on the same playing field as RFK last year, because as you know, points don't matter. If you get enough wins, you're in. So really, what's the penalty at the end of the day?
Well, Joe, we'll go to that here in just a little bit, because I want to bring that part up too.
Okay.
Steve, what are your feelings if they are guilty of this crime and they did alter it? And again, this is hypothetical. Do you think giving them the same penalty, and Front Row Motorsports was also giving a huge penalty at the end of the year too, and their penalty was for altering the box that kept collecting rubber and catching on fire, which was a safety hazard. They were giving that penalty too for altering a part, which theirs actually didn't help performance. It was to try to prevent their car from catching on fire. But Steve, the floor is yours.
How much time do we have?
Not that much, Steve.
Okay, well, you guys have already eaten dinner. I haven't, so and I am having lasagna. Okay, first off, apples to oranges, I agree there. First off, the Scotch tape incident was a penalty or a cheating that really couldn't be detected until post race, because they weren't going to peel the decals off the car, look under the tape, under the body skin, and tear the car to holy hell with the paint scheme to try and find out if there was Scotch tape there. They did do it post race. Okay. With the louvers. And they did run the car with the illegal Scotch tape, and one car won and one car finished second with the Scotch tape. So to me, that's a whole different can of worms. If the Scotch tape had been just stuck on the outside and they just bypassed it during pre-race inspection, I'd say, okay, you got an argument, but you guys don't have an argument with me on that one. The louvers were sitting there. And they peeled the louvers off and said, these don't look right. We're taking them off before you even take the truck off the hauler. Or they got it just off the hauler, and before they got to inspection or anything, those louvers were confiscated and taken away. Now, I'm a lawyer, okay? Judge, Mr. Judge, Mr. Moderator. No, we just slap those louvers on in transport because it allows more airflow in the hauler, so we air condition the engines and keep the dust off. Those aren't the louvers we ever intended to run with. Here's the louvers we intended to run with. You took them off. They're gone. We never even put the car on the track with those louvers on. You're telling me
Steve,
now?
you know you can't have a defense on ignorance.
Hang on. You're telling me I can't use transport tires, that I now have to put the tires I'm going to race on my car to put it in the hauler and transport it back and forth? No, I slap different tires on that car. Those are completely different tires. We have no intention of ever running those tires on the track. They may be deflated below minimum because we want to keep the balance of the car low so it doesn't hit a big bump and bounce up onto the roof. Yeah, it's not going to conform, but we had never had any intention of running those. So, I'm Mr. Jeff Gordon. I'm telling you right now, we never intended to run with those louvers. Those were just simply something. Now, I need to know, first off, on the louvers, are there specific measurements, angles, everything? We don't even know what they're saying was off on the louvers. The whole louver thing's been a gray area. NASCAR's come out and said, well, we really don't know what to do with these louvers.
Well, according to Denny Hamlin, they said don't touch them. That was the message to the team, according to somebody in the actual field of racing. Who is also a co-owner of a team.
Yeah, NASCAR also came out and said the louvers are kind of questionable right now in general because of the way they operate. The louvers are there pretty much to allow airflow from the bottom of the car up through the engine compartment to A, cool the engine, and B, reduce some of the downforce on the front end of the car by letting air flow through as opposed to just pushing it down and keeping it on the ground. Okay, so I don't know. I think that for Hamlin to come out and cry, it's going to be the most severe penalty in the history of NASCAR. Sounds a little bit like some sour grapes to me. If NASCAR was indeed, or if Hendrick was indeed trying to pull shenanigans, then they should be fined. Yeah, I mean, but in accordance with the penalty, and the penalty was no track time, no speed ever put on that car with those louvers on the car. So I think it's kind of a slap on the wrist as opposed to you put tape on your car and ran an entire race with illegal modification to the car.
Well, that was a gray area.
Second well, yeah, I don't agree with the stiffness of the penalty on that incident, the Scotch tape incident either, but they ruled on it, and that was not found till after they had run the race. The cars with the tape on it finished first and second. I don't remember where the other Hendrick or the other JGR cars finished, but it affected all four of them. So it definitely was something they were trying to slide by. All four of the Hendrick cars have the louvers on it. So, but like I said, as a good lawyer, I argue, no, those were just transport louvers. We just slapped those on. Well, you had them decaled like they were going to run. Well, these cars get out, they're presented, they're filmed the minute they come off the hauler. We don't want two pieces of crap parcel on the car. We want it to look good for pictures. So, yeah, we put them on. We're going to take them off and put correct louvers on before we ever got on the track.
Well, here's the one thing that I go back to is when the first person to give a defense for it is Jeff Gordon. He says this is weighing heavily on our mind. To me, that is I don't know if you want to call it an admission of guilt, but it definitely isn't an admission that they feel great about it. I think that is him saying there's a chance, without pretty much saying that we're going to get hammered, that we might get hammered before just going ahead and going ahead and laying that law down. Number two, Steve, you would know, unless you're Hillary Clinton in their emails, that you can't cry ignorance as a defense. If you're bringing a vehicle to inspection, then that is the vehicle. All of it on it is getting inspected. And we also know there are gray areas when it comes to inspection. Kyle Busch and them went through inspection. It passed based upon the laser. And if what we're talking about, the louvers were altered, it may not have done enough to change the part, its size or whatever it may be. It may fit completely different. And that may be where it's differed. We also don't know, going back, if we're going to compare to the Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin situation, Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin could have ran that same Scotch tape for 10 races, but because they didn't win, they didn't have that pulled back. So we don't know. And I think the same thing could have happened whenever it came to the louvers. We don't really know whether or not these louvers were the same that they were using. Why just alter it for Phoenix? Is it because they were using a new downforce package and they're like, hey, if we're going to use this new package, maybe we need to make adjustments? Again, this is all hypothetical at the end of the day, but if you're not even altering a part, you're adding tape to a part, it disqualified you from a win, then now altering a part, when NASCAR has said, you do not alter parts made for every single manufacturer that we get from all these different OEMs, and you're talking hundreds of different parts. If NASCAR made it black and white, and I think that's what NASCAR is again trying to do, not to beat on a dead horse on that part of it. I think NASCAR is doing the best that they can to not make rules subjective anymore and make them objective. So I think it's easy to say, yeah, Denny Hamlin's crying sour grapes because he was affected by a penalty. But that was him as a driver. I think him as an owner also looks at it, and he gave cadence to this, and maybe this is part of it too. He doesn't think anybody can compete with Chevy. And if those are the things that are possibly helping them when it comes to what we've seen the last two races, there is nobody in the field better right now than Kyle Larson and William Byron. I think maybe that's why he was presented it that way. But again, it could be political as well. I don't really know. The only thing I can present to you is what we do know and what was said, and we just break it down from there.
Well, I think we'll when's this penalty probably going to come out? Tomorrow. I really foresee this being on the same level as RFK, and really, I mean, I think even with the louvers being taken, Hendrick kind of proved that really wasn't what was giving them speed. That's not what's making them stand out. So, and they did
just dominate right after that.
Right. I will say this, and it's not really a caveat, but also I think whenever you're doing an investigation, and as somebody that has spent part of my actual working career in the courtroom, I will tell you that you have to find out all the factors. And if Hendrick felt like they were working in a gray area and their engineers said, hey, we have to adjust this for whatever reason, it's going to blow up our engine because the engine's not getting enough cool air, whatever. I think that those are facts that could be presented during the investigation and say, hey, we had to do that, or we just had 4 blown engines out there because what you're giving us is causing our engines to overheat, or whatever the circumstances may be. I think Steve, the argument that you presented with saying, hey, those are transport louvers, I think that's ridiculous. I mean, obviously anybody is going to look right through that. And I know you were being facetious when you said that. You were just trying to kind of explain a counterpoint or a possibility of what Hendrick could say. I understand that. But if there is a legitimate reason as to why they felt like they needed to alter a part on the car that they were told not to, and they felt like they were working in a gray area and they didn't know that they were committing an infraction, I think that all has to be taken into account too. My understanding of the Denny Hamlin interview, though, was he was not saying this really to be contentious. I think he was just giving his opinion on what we're going to see. I don't think it was I don't think he was condemning Hendrick in any way. I think he was just being matter of fact and saying, hey, this is probably what I think is going to happen.
Correct.
Steve? Ryan?
No, go ahead, Steve. If you got some, go ahead.
Yeah, I just got to go down a list of things. I made notes while you were talking. Ryan.
You really don't have to do that, Steve.
Oh, I want to. Trust me, I want to. I want to.
All right. Here we
First
go.
off, you talked about ignorance is no excuse to break the law. My understanding was, and you mentioned the word inspection. My understanding was these louvers were confiscated before they even got to inspection. The car never even presented to inspection. So
why would they confiscate a part before it was inspected?
I mean, maybe
a hunch.
A hunch, maybe a hunch. Maybe they're right now. They're probably looking. Why is the Chevrolet so much faster? Well, let's just take the louvers and let's see what that is.
NASCAR's blackballing Hendrick.
No, I didn't say they were blackballing. That's the term you used. I said that they're looking to see what is making the Chevrolet so much faster. And obviously they're going to pick Hendrick because Hendrick has the best engineers, the best motor people in the sport right now. So they're going to do that. So the argument of ignorance is no excuse to break the law. I'm not sure there was ignorance here. And I don't think the cars ever got to inspection. I don't think they weren't confiscated at inspection is my understanding. Second, you talked about Jeff Gordon weighing heavily on his mind. That's no admission of guilt. Trust me, it weighs heavily on my mind that I do a show with you two guys.
Well, you don't have to.
But I go ahead and do it. So, so I don't think when Jeff Gordon says, and I'm just being facetious there, I love doing a show with you guys. Weighing heavily on his mind. I think, Hendrick doesn't want bad publicity and being presented as cheaters when the facts haven't come out yet or anything of that nature. So
everybody in media lies, though, Steve. Don't you think that he could have just done a lot better saving a face and said, no, we're cooperating with NASCAR and we think that, we've stayed in compliance and, we look for this to all clear up by the end of the week.
I don't know. Have you ever been in the position where somebody stuck a microphone in your face and asked you a really stupid question?
I have never had a microphone stuck in my.
I've
well,
had
you
that
almost said so
multiple times.
No, and if I
and
did,
I've
I better
answered
get
some
paid a
of
lot
them
of money.
intelligently and some of them stupidly.
Well, this wasn't a TV quote. This was a quote.
The media person sticking a
Well,
microphone
and
in
right,
his
and we're not
ass.
we're not just here trying to defend or sway Hendrick in either way. This is more of a matter of fact.
This is what we have. This is what we
this
have.
is the evidence
Right,
that we
right.
have. I don't want Hendrick to get penalized any more than the next Hendrick fan.
I look at it like this: if the louvers, if there are specific measurements for the louvers, and Hendrick is out of line with those measurements, then they need to be punished, and they will be punished. I'm not, and you guys can attest to this better than me right now. Is NASCAR really in a position right now with television ratings and everything else going on to really want to be shitting? I mean, I'm sorry, I used that word. No, we're not on the radio. Anyway, I won't use it anyway. Dumping on the premier team in the league right now. Do they really want to do that? I mean, if it's not proven it's a problem, NASCAR should have quietly taken the louvers, gone away, done their testing, come back and said, we have found a bona fide penalty on Hendrick. We are fining them.
Well, think about this though, Steve.
Instead,
controversy sells. Controversy sells, right?
Okay.
What
all right.
you kick?
Yeah, we're doing a show about it on Tuesday night. You're exactly right. Yeah.
You kick the best team in the balls going into the race, minus your top driver. What does that do? That riles up Hendrick fans. That gives them something to be mad about and say, you know what? You just took 100 points from my driver, and he's going to bust your ass, and he's still going to make it into the playoffs. That sells. And maybe is that something we're looking at right now? Because NASCAR is actually trying to conjure up a reason to create controversy with these louvers, something that probably honestly doesn't alter, just like Scotch tape, probably doesn't alter your effectiveness on the racetrack. It may. At the end of the day,
it's a little bit different.
I would think altering the louvers would alter the characteristics.
I'm just saying though, obviously with their performance on Sunday, it didn't make a damn bit of difference. I mean, Josh Berry finished in the top 10 for Christ's sake.
That's true.
So it's obviously Hendrick is not being downtrodden by the louvers and happen to use the one that NASCAR gave them back. So this could just be a conjured up controversy for ratings. Who knows?
You know what, Joe? I've just got to say this. What you just said may be the most intelligent thing I've ever heard you say.
Well, I'm not that dumb, Steve. Even though
I say that with all sincerity.
Oh, thank you.
That may be what you just said. May be the most intelligent thing I have ever heard you say.
No.
I think that would be asking his wife to marry him would probably be the most intelligent question.
Okay, well, I don't know his wife. So.
I kept fed. I have.
But here's your point. They took the louvers away, and you're right. All 4 Hendrick cars, including Josh Berry, finish in the top 10.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's that tell you about the louvers? They probably didn't have a whole lot of effect on Hendrick's performance.
Yeah.
Probably not.
And I will say, listening, I'm probably the only one that actually listened to Action is Detrimental. And I just did it on the way home. I have a 40-mile drive one way every single day. So I just turn something on and listen. And the thing that Denny Hamlin has repetitively said is that there is an aero advantage when it comes to Chevys. He expects, unlike Joe, that this will be the least amount of parity. He thinks Chevys will dominate. And he said that 2 weeks ago. And he said that, there was no animosity the way that it was presented and the way that it was said. I think he just thinks that right now Chevy is clear and ahead above and head and shoulders above everybody else. And that unfortunately for them, whenever NASCAR sent out a statement that said, don't alter this, that there was a possibility that it could have been altered. Now, whether that was it could have been somebody at the shop that said, these pieces of shit will not go on here the right way. I'm going to do something so they do. That we don't know.
Right.
I think the best defense in terms of, if we're going to play defense and offense in terms of, your ability to get away with this, is to say that it harms the driver's safety. I think that's the only way that anybody could ever get away with doing something like this and getting penalized, to say the driver's safety is at effect. And we've already seen fires in the cockpit, holding rubber, things of that nature. I think that's the only way that Hendrick gets away with this scotch-free, but I don't know if they're going to. And I'm kind of interested to see what happens if they do, because there's not been one single team that has won an appeal yet. None.
Okay. All right. Let me play devil's advocate to your comment you just made.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Gordon, you think that your defense is that this alters hinders the driver's safety. Did you just find this out while you were hauling the cars from Charlotte out to Vegas? Or did you?
No, I found it out in the email. I found it out in the email when you told me not to alter it, and because they're pieces of shit that you keep sending us.
If you feel, though, your defense is you think it alters the driver's safety, why didn't you bring this to NASCAR's attention Monday morning and give us 5 days to look at these louvers and test them and say, yeah, we agree with you. We're going to relax some restrictions on the louvers. So I don't know. I think this. I think this. I'm going to stand the same ground I stood with the Scotch tape. I think the Scotch tape thing was asinine, but it was altering the car, whether it's Scotch tape or anything. It was altering the car. Okay, in the sense of what altering a car is, they altered the car. If Hendrick finds that they altered these louvers, or NASCAR finds they altered these louvers, then Hendrick ought to be fine. The only difference I see in this is that JGR won and finished second in a race with the altered car. Hendrick never got on the track with the altered car. To me, that's the only difference. They caught it. So therefore, I don't think it should be the biggest fine in the history of NASCAR. I think if they find out they did alter these, they penalize them, they fine them the 25 drivers points, they fine, Keselowski's deal was over the top too, but you go that route, you don't turn around and say it's going to be the biggest fine in the history of NASCAR.
And the reason why it's the biggest fine, it's a set fine, but it would affect 4 people at one time.
Yeah, exactly.
Why it would be the biggest. It's not any bigger than Keselowski's. It affects 4 drivers and not just Brad. So just to clear that up. But
I just stand my ground that the car never made it on the track with these louvers that we know of. You're right. That we know of. And when they took the louvers away, they still kicked everybody's ass pretty solidly, 1 and 2.
And that's their most solid defense as well.
10, yeah. It doesn't matter. You took them away. We still beat everybody. And in terms of Chevy having the best aero package, seems to me 2 or 3 years ago, I don't know the exact year, but Toyotas were eating the crap out of everybody's lunch then too. And it was all this whining and crying that Toyotas, because they were new in the NASCAR, they were giving them the best aero package and the most leniency on the aero. And before that, when the Fords came, made the changes, it was the Fords. That the whole aero thing is cyclical. It almost seems. And the Chevy, remember the Chevys couldn't get out of their shadow. when they first launched the newer body styles. When Chevy went to the Camaro, Toyota went to the Camry, Ford went to the Mustang. All the new body styles, it seemed like Toyota just started winning everything, and Chevy couldn't finish any worse than 50th in a 36-man race. And then now here it's all gone cyclical, and now the Chevys are just dominating. That's manufacturer's sour grapes right there.
Well,
It's cyclical.
I'll say this before, we're getting close to, well, actually we're over half an hour, but I'll say this, like we saw last year with Keselowski, we really didn't get a bunch of information from NASCAR. It was kind of hard to hide the Scotch tape thing. Everybody knew that. And of course, Denny Hamlin kind of made fun of it, eating breakfast with the trophy.
Trophy with it hanging off of the eagle.
Yeah, with Scotch tape hanging off of it. Here's what I think NASCAR needs to do a better job. When these penalties come out tomorrow, if indeed penalties do come out, they need to come out and explain not only why the penalty is occurring, what their justification is for a penalty, and then explain why those specific parts that were altered was going to cause an advantage for Hendrick in a race. Explain your thought process as to why you felt like there was an unfair advantage in a race because of what you found. If you can't explain that, if you can't say, hey, we saw these, they were altered at a different angle, or they were shortened, or whatever the case may be, whatever was wrong with these louvers, you have to give justification as to why that would have altered the race outcome. And if you can't do that, then I think with any team, with any driver, if you can't justify why you're doing something other than saying, hey, we told you not to touch them, like with the Keselowski deal, filing down the spoiler, nobody could really give an answer. And I don't remember an answer coming out as to what advantage did that really give them. With the Scotch tape, what advantage did that really give them? I understand it was airflow over a seam in the car, and I get that. But like I said, that one, the Scotch tape deal was kind of out in the open because it had to be, because everybody knew about it. What if we see a hellacious penalty come out tomorrow for Hendricks, where we're talking 100 drivers points, 100 owner points, pit crew members being suspended for 8 weeks, whatever.
It would just be the crew chief. It would just be the crew chief, not the pit
crew chief being suspended for 4 races, 8 races, whatever it may be. I think NASCAR, along with that, has to give justification as to why and explain themselves. And if they don't, then I think I'm going to cry foul on NASCAR all the way. Ryan?
Well, let me ask you this, Joe. As somebody that, again, has been in a courtroom, the court of law is it's the rule of law. You don't have to give a justification. If somebody steals from the rich and they say, well, it's not going to hurt them, it's still the law. And I don't think NASCAR is going to bend or give an explanation of why they see it's fit that the law is that way. It's the law. And if the law says don't alter single source parts, then you don't alter single source parts. And I just don't think that you're going to get that, because you're going to set yourself up for failure if you're NASCAR, if I look at it from that standpoint.
No, that's absolutely wrong. If the state or the government has a requirement to prove why this caused somebody else to be a victim. And there are certain exceptions. If you decide to flee from a police officer because, you have a medical emergency going on, things like that always, and not to get off tangent, but things like that, there's always excuses.
So you're saying this is
no, I'm not.
In a crowded theater.
I don't want to get off on a tangent. What I'm saying is NASCAR has to justify why these penalties are coming down, or at least explain what their thought process is. Why did you tell them you can't alter the louvers? What advantage do you think somebody can get from them?
Because we said don't alter single source parts. That's all they're going to say.
Right, with no explanation. It's more of me as a fan saying, if you're going to say this, why are you saying it? Explain to me as the fan.
I think that's the media's job to do that. I think that's the media's job to say this is why they don't want them to do that. I don't think that's the governing body's job, because the governing body's job is to set the rules and for everybody to play by the rules. And I don't think that they're going to do that, because they're only going to set themselves up for criticism, because then we'll just have another show like you're saying, and they'll go, well, see, it only helped this much, or it didn't even help that much, or hell, we could say it didn't help at all again, because, the two drivers that were really, really good, did really, really good. And they were both Hendrick. So I understand your sentiment, Joe, and I don't disagree with it. I just don't think there's any world where that happens, because
Me either.
I don't think a government body ever does that.
Yeah, I'm just going to be disappointed because I want to know, and there's only so much information out there, and NASCAR really keeps that close to the cheek when it comes to these things, and I don't understand why.
One last hypothetical for both of you, and again, this is a hypothetical.
Well, wait, can I add one thing to Joe's comment? Just one sentence. The sentence is just that there's one caveat, Joe, to your argument, and I agree with your argument. First thing NASCAR has to do is to determine that the louvers were altered and they were out of reg or specs. They may come back and say, actually, they just looked different.
But we got a bad tip. We got a bad tip by Denny
template, or they got somebody dropped a oil filter.
That would be awesome.
Somebody dropped an oil filter on one and it dinged it a little bit. They have to prove first off that there was alteration to the louvers.
Yeah.
So last question, and we'll wrap this up. What would be a bigger black mark when it comes to NASCAR? Would it be penalizing William Byron, any type of playoff implications because of this penalty? Say that they do take away, 10 playoff points or possibly forfeit a win or anything of that nature. Would that be a bigger penalty in black eye for NASCAR, or would it be do absolutely nothing? Because there are people out there, especially people that hate Chad Canals, that think he's a big cheater and that he'll get away with something else. And there's a whole bunch of people out there. We know how passionate NASCAR fans are. So in your eyes, if you're NASCAR and you sit here and go, damn, it didn't really help that much, but fuck, I feel like we got to do something. Or do you go, we set the precedent, we're going to take away playoff points, even though we think this had nothing to do with William Byron winning the last two races?
NASCAR has already pushed themselves into a damn if you do, damn if you don't situation. Because right now, if they come out tomorrow and say, you know what, we took these louvers, but we found absolutely is nothing wrong with them, half of the NASCAR fandom is going to go, that's bullshit. You're only doing it because it's Hendrick. We know shit was messed up. I
How much money, Rick? How much money under the table?
And if you do penalize them, the other half of the NASCAR fandom who roots for Hendrick is going to go, that's bullshit. You're only doing it because it's Hendrick. And I think really at the end of the day, though, what this comes down to is if they do test the louvers, or they have, and Hendrick has committed an infraction against the rules, I think you have to remain, at the end of the day, you have to remain consistent as to what the penalties that you've handed down in the past. And the only thing that we could really look to, as something this egregious, or possibly this egregious, is really RFK last year, I think. So I think you have to stay consistent with that, Steve.
Yeah, I agree with all the comments both of you guys made. I just say this. I think that NASCAR needs to get their head out of their rear ends. And I'm not using foul language, although everybody else on the show seems to be. I'm going to try and stay away from it.
Saint Steve, Saint Stefan.
I think that what NASCAR needs to do is, and I'm going to use an ugly example, just like the death penalty in life. I'm not sure I'm a proponent of the death penalty or not, but I think the mistake with the death penalty is it should be swift and it should be decisive. So if you're going to give somebody the death penalty, you get one appeal and within 30 days, you're dead. Not 20 years on death row. That makes people think about doing it. So I think if Hendrick gets caught and they won the race, the standard penalty for a violation of any kind and a winning car is you lose the race. The race is taken away from you. Standard. Guess how much cheating will go away? Immediately,
as much as
upon declaration, the race, just like what happened to Hamlin. And Elliott got that race. And nobody in Elliott's camp was happy about taking it. But I think that NASCAR needs to get standardized on that. If they find that there is an infraction and they're guilty of it, and a Hendrick car won the race. Now it's a little different in this case because they didn't have the infracted parts on the car when they won the race.
At
so
least
that
for
they
Phoenix.
take it. But if they get caught in a post-race inspection with an illegal part, boom, and you win, that's gone. Your victory points are gone, your money's gone, everything's gone. It's like you did not exist for that race. Now go talk to your sponsors and tell them why you decided to cheat.
Well, Steve, as you know, I know you know this, Ryan, I know you know this. In auto racing, when you get caught in any form or fashion of auto racing, you're only guilty of getting caught.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
Well, guys, I
done.
appreciate you both jumping in. Again, this was an impromptu. I thought we could have a good discussion with it, and you guys delivered great. And, we'll have a weekly show that comes out Thursday, and I expect that we'll actually have a definitive answer to this. And also, we will talk a little bit more about what Denny Hamlin had to say about the short track package and why he thought it didn't work, adding to, again, another conversation that we can go where he said, and I'll just give you a teaser, one of the reasons why NASCAR short track packages have not been working is because engines have to be made to help teams like BJ McLeod and Rick Ware Racing. So I obviously will have something very strong to say about trying to help out teams finish in last place every single week. So my name is Ryan Peters for Joe Spillman and for Steve Risley. This has been Stuck at the Catch